Welcome back to my S54 build series. My name is Stefan, and make sure before we begin you hit that subscribe button and that little notification bell so you can see episodes 4, 5, 6, and so on as we get this S54 cleaned up, rebuilt, and into my E46. So now that we've gotten most of the harder stuff out of the way, we're going to be focusing on a few smaller parts. This episode I'm going to dedicate really to removing the alternator and the idler pulleys, and then kind of anything related to the pulley system on this S54 motor. So on the last episode, we already took a 17mm to take off our positive cable coming from the wiring harness, which obviously is gone now. And we also unplugged the plug, the sensor, whatever it is, from the wiring harness as well that was going to the alternator. If we look closely, there's already one bolt here that is supporting the alternator. And then on the bottom side here, there is one bolt there, which is also supporting the alternator. So in all, there's only 2 bolts actually supporting the alternator. So we can begin quite simply by removing the cap from this pulley. Now, this is a good time to check all your pulleys, because to take all your alternator off and change anything like your water pump out, you're gonna have to remove your belts anyway. I didn't actually get this engine with belts, so sorry I can't show that process being done where I remove the belts. But in this case, like I was saying, check your pulleys. This one's got quite a bit of play. I got one down here. Also quite a bit of play. And then this one's actually not that bad, but since I have the engine out and we're gonna end up putting everything back anyway, I'm gonna buy all new pulleys. So to even access this top bolt, what we're first gonna do is we're gonna take our flathead screwdriver, get in there nice and easy, and pop this little cap off. That will reveal this hex head for the bolt. So it looks like it's gonna be a 16mm. And never forget, if you are having done this only for the first time, take lots of pictures so you know exactly how things go back in place, or you can obviously reference my video. So let's go ahead and take this off with our 16mm. Man, mine is on there pretty good. And we've got that. Look how long this bolt is. So this pulley is a little bit more generous because it does have an alignment dimple right there, which is gonna end up going right in this little cutout right there, so that you can always get it in the exact same correct position every time. But that won't always be the case. So again, take lots of photos. Moving on to the bottom bolt here, that's also gonna be a 16mm. And then you're gonna want to support your alternator, even if it is kind of stuck there. Support it just so it doesn't fall. And then, in some cases, I've seen these pretty tight and some pretty loose. In mine, it's pretty tight, so just gotta do some wiggling till we get it free. Eventually, it'll come off. And there we go, and our alternator is off. Go ahead and clean up all that, just so when it comes time to reinstallation, it'll go right back on. Throughout my videos, you might notice that I have bolts back where I had already pulled them out. The reason I do that is so that I don't actually lose them. For example, up here, these bolts mounted down that wiring harness box. I've got like this one for the intake manifold stay that I put back, and that's all just so that when it comes time to reinstall, I'm not looking for the hardware, and it's everything that I need is right there. So let's go ahead and remove this idler pulley. This one's going to be a little bit different. We're going to be taking, let's see here, a 13mm for there. And then we actually are not going to be touching this guy. This is to remove the pulley itself. In your case, if you're just changing this pulley, then you would take this out. But I'm taking the whole thing off. I'll be changing the pulley later. So right now, actually, I'll loosen this just so it's easy for me to get off when it comes time to reinstall. But there's actually another bolt right here on the back side that we have to remove, and that's kind of gonna loosen this whole little strut piece. Just so you can get a visual representation of how many parts consist of it, I think you can actually buy this part of the pulley right here separate from everything, so you won't need to remove this, because I ended up just a little bit stripping it, but looks like it's still okay. But yeah, if you actually remove this top bolt like we did first, it looks like you'll be able to just slide this whole system off and then replace the pulley itself while leaving the bracket on the car. Again, in my case, I'm pulling it off because I'm pulling everything off to clean it, but yeah, there you go. So now let's get on to removing the air conditioning pump, or whatever you call it. I actually don't know, maybe AC compressor, but there's 3 main bolts to removing this. There's the bottom one here, top one here, and then one on the back side here. Again, how easy is it to access while the engine's in the car? I have no idea. I will find out once I get it into my car, but for what we got now, that's all you get. So it looks like, yep, it's gonna be 13 millimeters as well for all 3 of these. And just a little bit of a pulling, and there we go. We've got our AC removed, just like that. Wow, this thing is heavy. No wonder people do AC deletes. Now, I'm not really sure what purpose this big bracket serves, but I'm gonna assume it's just a bracket for holding onto the AC. So there's a pulley right here attached to it. I believe if I remove it by one bolt back here in the back, one here, and one here, the whole thing should be able to come off, and the pulley with it. As far as changing the pulley, which this one has minimal play, but I'm still gonna change it. I believe it looks like here there's just 2 13 millimeter bolts on the front side here that need to be removed. As far as this side goes, it's actually more than just the one up here. There is one down here that honestly I'm not quite sure how to access, but I know we can get this pulley off. Getting this pulley off would really be helpful if you have a breaker bar, so you can put tension on this one and access that, as well as access that. And that's how you'll get this pulley off. And now keep in mind when you're taking this bracket off that these 3 holes, 1, 2, 3, will use a shorter length bolt than these 2 side ones, which are about this long, as you can see. And it looks like it actually clears without having to take this off, given the bolt lengths are a little bit longer on this side than the 3, as I was saying, on this side. And then of course this is where the pulley went. So now let's work on removing this water pump pulley and then eventually the water pump. So we're gonna start by taking a 10 millimeter and taking these off. Now on an SMG car, you do have a big old fan here, so you are gonna need a fan clutch tool. This engine was actually from an SMG car, but the guy I bought it off of already removed the fan. So honestly, that saves me time, but there is a special tool for that on SMG cars and automatic cars for that matter, for E36 and E46. So keep an eye out for that tool. It's pretty cheap, you can get it on Amazon. It'll be a little bit low quality, but better than nothing. All right, and make sure you keep those bolts with your water pump. In my case, I'm gonna put them back here for peace of mind to ensure myself that, hey, I'm not gonna lose these, because they're threaded in and they can't go anywhere. Or if you drop it like that. But yeah, always screw my hardware in where it goes without whatever other piece, just so that I have extra peace of mind that I'm not gonna lose my hardware. So those are there. It's not like they're gonna get in the way at all for me anyway. So now we can move on to removing the water pump and all the other water pump bolts. So just like on the pulley, we're gonna use a 10mm. I got an extended one this time since things are getting a little bit deeper. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts that we got to go after. Now you run into these things a lot where you'll see some parts have longer bolts than others. Always remember where the longer ones will go and the shorter ones will go. Otherwise you're going to run into quite a bit of problems. Now it'll give us the ability to actually take this entire assembly off, including this line here. Some wiggling, and there we go. We've got our whole water pump with broken gasket, which got left on the motor, which is exactly why we're replacing this, because things like this tend to corrode a lot since we have water and metal. So our water pump, our thermostat is in there, our thermostat housing, all in one. Now if you are removing just the thermostat housing, you can remove these two guys here, and it should be long bolts that go all the way to the bottom that you can remove right there and there, which will allow you to separate it from the top, and then this one you just pull off like so. So it's actually a very common problem on all the E46, not just the M3, where the water pump or some other component of the cooling system, like the expansion tank, goes bad. So it's very important to be changing anything related to the cooling system. In this case, I'm doing everything. On the M cars, the housing is made of metal, so I don't need to really change it. But what I do need to change, and take this apart as well, is the gasket up here that connects the housing to the pump, and then the gasket from the pump to the block, especially because you can see here that the gasket is completely deteriorating. No bueno. Since we got it off, I'm actually going to show you guys the thermostat housing to water pump removal. So like I said earlier, we're going to be taking off these two here, and actually 3, because I just noticed that this one goes all the way to the bottom, which is great. Those are things we're looking for. So let's take those. Dealing with a 10mm once more. This is actually easier on the engine when everything is mounted, especially if you have stuff that is corroded and rusted in place, like mine. Free. Go ahead and get all those loose. And with those 3 bolts removed, our engine lifting point is off, and we're now able to separate the housing from the pump. And we can see here that the gasket on my housing actually wasn't bad. It didn't separate or anything, but when you get a new thermostat, that should be something that ends up coming with the with the thermostat, is another gasket. So I'm going to replace that as well. And then while we have everything off, while you're replacing everything, it's always good to clean up all the edges so that when you put the new gasket, everything is going to sit down perfectly and have no leaks, because nobody wants leaks. Now when it comes to removing the actual thermostat from the thermostat housing, super simple. Might be a little bit stuck. You can pry it up with a screwdriver if you need to, but in my case, just a little bit of rotation and wiggle, and then boom, it's out, just like that. The only other thing I forgot to mention is, try and get a new gasket for this hose here. But other than that, this hose is only mounted by another 10 millimeter over here. So once you remove that, this whole line will come off. I'll do that right now. But with that said, you can see that we have now taken off every belt-driven accessory from our S54. I'm gonna end up leaving this stuff on. Now I'm pretty much just gonna move to changing the rod bearings, and then after I do the rod bearings, I'll do the valve cover, just because, again, I figure I'll do that last. It's super easy for us to do, so it will be later on in the series. The rod bearings are a little bit more difficult of the project, but it actually doesn't require us to be removing all the stuff we just did. Again, I'm just doing that because I want to clean the motor up, pressure wash it, and get rid of all the oil that got tossed around over the 122,000 miles that this engine accumulated over its lifespan. So thank you guys for sticking around and watching this video up to this point. If you skipped here, no problem, don't worry about it, but it does mean a lot to me that if you're looking for this information and I've provided you an answer, that I've been able to help you. And in any case, this is just, all for my fun and my enjoyment. So I'm really glad to have you guys along the road anyway to experience it with me. With that said, please, please, please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you can see the next episode. We're moving into removing the oil pan to get the rod bearings changed.